Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bluddworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today's video is the season one wrap up of our AD&D First Edition Keepers of Quasqueton campaign. So if you've been following this channel, you know that I started up this campaign about 15 weeks ago with initially a group of 12 players, and 10 actually showed up for the session 0. And so we ran through actually 2 sessions of session 0 because there were so many players at the time. And then initially we launched with session 1 with 9 players. So I'm going to introduce, for those of you that are new, but recap for those of you that have been following along, from the very beginning, the nine player characters and players that were involved with the campaign at the time. So we start with Amalric. He is a gray elf fighter magic user played by Blaine. Angus is a human ranger played by Kelly Foote. Breeze is I believe it's a high elf. I just have written here, elf cleric played by MT Inside. We had Kelburn, a human monk played by Glow. Crandon, a halfling thief played by Vince. Korabar, a gray elf druid played by William. Mirador, a human cleric played by Mirador. Urias, a human paladin played by Calster, and Word, which was a human magic user played by Word. So these initial 9 player characters, some of them whom I played my D&D campaign with, that was Amalric and Word. So they followed me along through Roll20 to this new campaign. And we basically upgraded their characters from the D&D campaign that they were running to AD&D. Although I did keep them at first level just to start off with the rest of the party. So they had begun to be introduced to what would become the Keepers of Quasqueton campaign. So initially, there was no campaign name yet, and it was still very much a developing story as it was going along. It was developing, for me as well, because the players' actions were going to steer in some ways the campaign, even though I had an overall end game that I was looking for. I did not develop anything beyond the first initial entry into the world of Greyhawk for them, and specifically into the town of Westburn in the Yeomanry. I can never pronounce that word. Yeomanry, and so that's where it really began. And all of the players, except for the 2 I mentioned, were all brand new acquaintances with one another, and first time players with me as well. So really, really exciting beginnings 15 weeks ago. So we move on now to session 2. And session 2, they began to embark upon their first inkling that they would be traveling south towards Kendall Keep, which is the keep on the Borderlands, for those of you that aren't aware. And session 2 included a new entry into the group, which they met at Kendall Keep. So at Kendall Keep, the keep on the Borderlands, they met up with Kinnell, a hill dwarf. Forget the player's name. I didn't include that in this particular sheet. So Kinnell, the dwarf fighter, joined their group. So now we were up to the maximum size of the party with 10 players, 10 player characters. So we had the dwarf, we had the human paladin, we had Almeric, the fighter magic user, and so on and so on. So all of the original showed up, and we had one new addition. And so now they started to discover that they had encountered a small group of bandits on the way down to Kendall Keep, and now they started to discover some hints and rumors of this of this old and somewhat forgotten um, stronghold by a powerful magic user and a fighter who were named Zelagar and Rogan, and they picked up little rumors here and there about the stronghold or about the magic user and the fighter, and they wanted to, of course, search into the unknown, and so they began their first embarkation upon B1 in search of the unknown. Now, all along, I'm obviously modifying the official module so that it not only addresses the fact that there are, at this point, 10 player characters, and so it had to be modified to adjust for that, but also I wanted to make the adventure module different than if the players had actually read it, because it's certainly readily available for anybody to read, and also have it in some way be the launching point for their overall campaign. Now, the title still was not there yet, not even in my own mind. The Keepers of Quasqueton really didn't come until much later on, probably after our 9th session or 10th session. I started getting the idea that this is what the title of the campaign would become. So again, quite a lot of interaction between the players, through their characters, and just getting a sense of how much they were going to buy into this campaign, and that was something that I was, very interested in learning from them. And as we were going on with our conversations, many conversations that you really have to have when you're planning on doing a long campaign. And once I started getting the sense that their buy-in to a very long campaign was pretty much there, present, that of course changes the way that I started thinking about the campaign and some of the things that I would have to do along the way. So that was the end of session 2, and as I said, I didn't quite have that full feel of the party just yet. Certainly not how much of a campaign they were willing to buy into. And that brings us to session 3. So session 3, between 2 and 3, we lost several players, and the reason for that was severalfold. But one player I think we just lost because there was the party was just too large, and I guess it just wasn't his thing. And that's fine, when you're running a very large group, or if you're running a very small group, sometimes that creates a table dynamic that that some people just don't find appealing to them. They either want to shine more, or perhaps it's just there's just too much going on and can't handle so much so much interaction, back and forth amongst, multiple players. I mean, it's a difficult thing for a DM as well to keep such a large group intact and moving along, where everyone still has some input, and just keeping it going is very difficult with so many players. So the third session had Amalric, the Grey Elf fighter magic user, Kelburn, the human monk, Angus, the human ranger, Breeze, the half-elf cleric, and Mirador, the human cleric. So we had our two clerics, we had our fighter magic user, we had our human monk, and our human ranger. So we had lost our paladin, we had lost our we didn't have a well, for this session actually, Crandon, our thief, wasn't able to make this session, so we did have that aspect of it as well. And then we lost our human fighter, and we lost our druid. And as I said, for a variety of reasons, we lost the paladin because of work-related scheduling issue, and so we moved forward. And that's one of the benefits of having such a large group, is that you are able to you're still able to move forward, and still able to to just slightly modify the adventure based on now a lesser number of player characters, as opposed to having as many as I did previously. Now, just the thing about the campaign and setting it up, when I was on Roll20 and I initially advertised, I was initially planning on having 16 players running 2 sessions with 2 different groups of eight players, and that would have been a complete nightmare. I would have never been able to manage 2 completely different sessions with 16 overall players. So I'm really glad that I had some of the the wisdom to realize that no, that would have been a real mistake, and I'm certainly glad that I did not do it. However, I did have several players who are waiting in the wings, ready to come in. So for those of you that are thinking that perhaps you've heard it, within the various tabletop role playing communities that you might visit, that it's very hard to attract players to old school role playing, whether it be actual older editions of Dungeons and Dragons, or other OSR games that aren't Dungeons and Dragons, but just other games in general. I've never had a problem attracting a lot of players, actually an unnecessary number of players, to OSR games, and so never let that be something that you get set into your mind. Oh, it'll be too hard to get a number of players in. It quite frankly is very easy. You put out an advertisement. Hey, I'm running a new campaign. It's meant to be a long-term campaign for AD&D First Edition, sticking pretty much to the rules as written, with just some slight modifications or homebrews or house rules. But for the most part, you're selling it on a real authentic approach to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition. You will attract players. You'll have no problem doing that. So Session 3 was over, and we moved forward, and they are now delving even further into Quasqueton. They've now identified that it is Quasqueton, so they know they're in the right place, and they're slowly making their way through the dungeons, and or the level, I should say. It's not quite dungeons. They're in the finished off portion of the stronghold, and they're encountering kobolds and orcs for the most part, and they are aware of troglodytes being someplace in the area, gnolls being someplace within the stronghold, and hobgoblins as well. But initially, they're only encountering those few types of creatures, plus a green slime that they fought, and shrieker mushrooms that they encountered as well. So a few little things here and there scattered about within the giant rats as well. So your typical fare for a first level dungeon adventure. Session 4 brings in some new players and the return of one of the older. Like I said, he was unavailable for that one session. So we have Amalric, uh, the fighter magic user. We have Angus, the human ranger. We have Breeze, the cleric, elven cleric. Cedric, a new player, um, played by Ivan. The Cedric is a human magic user played by Ivan, and Ivan is my dungeon master for the one game that I do play in, and he's been my dungeon master, for quite some time now. We're probably going into several months, although we had two separate campaigns so far. One was using Dungeons and Dragons, basic, and then the second season was a game of his own design, and we're actually wrapping that up tomorrow, and then we'll see where we go in a month or so when we pick up possibly where we left off. I'm not quite sure, but Cedric agreed to join and play into my group, and so Cedric, the magic user, joins us. Ennis, the human fighter, is a new player that came in, played by Gene, and so he had come in. Kandrias, the human paladin, also new, played by Alan, so he had entered in. So we replaced our magic user, our fighter, and our paladin in just one session. So that was very, very quickly. We brought them in. Crandon, the halfling thief, returned. We had Mirador, ever present, and a new replacement for our druid was Sparrow, a half-elf druid played by Leah. So our only female in a group of 9. So really great having an addition, and also having a female player to help bring some of that perspective into the group as well. So session 4 went, pretty smoothly with everyone getting to know each other. There was a story about how, and how they got about there, and I went through that in the individual video. I won't rehash it. But they started working off really, really well with each other, and moving on, we go to session 5, and session 5 had 8 players. So one individual was not able to make it, and it looks like it was Kandrias, who was moving at the time. So he was going to end up missing session 5, and so the rest of the party, Ennis, Angus, Breeze, Cedric, Sparrow, Crandon, Almeric, I took him out of alphabetical order, and Mirador, all were present, and digging even deeper and deeper into Quasqueton. Now, I know someone asked me, like, what do I do in a previous video in the comments, like, how do I run my campaigns? And I will split to a different screen and kind of show you what I do to at least help me out in organizing these things. But the main thing is to have a binder, and that's what I'm actually flipping through right now, just trying to refresh my memory of things as we do this wrap up. Section 6 was a pretty heavy combat session. This was when the players were still delving into even deeper into the stronghold, and they encountered an ogre, along with more orcs and some hobgoblins, if I'm recalling correctly. But certainly the challenge had increased, and they started taking some damage. They had also at this stage had their first individual taken out by friendly fire, not killed, but certainly laid up and incapacitated by a friendly fire attack. And so that was something that they started to realize is is something that's very real in AD&D First Edition. They also started realizing by this session that their sheer numbers, especially moving in certain spaces, becomes a detriment. And another lesson that I hope that they learned in this particular session as well is that sometimes being overly cautious can be a detriment as well, because at one point their party had gotten separated and cut off because the orcs that they were getting ready to fight had slammed the door shut and bolted it, or at least blocked it, keeping the rest out and leaving just two of the players to have to deal with about six orcs. And in this particular instance, that's when the halfling thief took a fairly serious hit, and the others the others that were trapped in the room with him really had to carry the fight until the rest of the party could actually make their way into the space. So again, really, really important for you as a DM to take into account various factors about party size, and you have to prevent them from steamrolling through everything. You also have to modify things like wandering monster encounters and things like that, because such a large group is not going to be able to move through a space as quietly, certainly not with the same ease that they might. This particular room where they really got into a combat with was a fairly narrow room, and so very difficult for them to actually maneuver within that space and still combat their opponents without also putting themselves at risk of either hitting each other with missile fire or even melee combat. So fumbles could produce some really seriously bad outcomes. We then go to session 7, and the party is still the same full party, but now they're heading back towards they're returning to Westburn because they're ready to level up and heal up. And it is during their trip to Westburn they decide to leave the fighter Ennis, who was seriously injured, in Kendall Keep as they move forward to follow some leads, and they got into a very, very big combat with a large group of bandits, close to 30 bandits, and they managed to actually thwart the bandits, killing most of them, and only a few escaping, but good enough to spread the word around. And this is where I started to develop the idea for the players to start to realize was that both the positive and the negative consequences of their action are going to have an effect on the world around them. And clearing out those bandits made a noticeable difference in the travel back and forth between Kendall Keep and Westburn. And every time that the players traveled that route, I made sure that they realized in their interactions with caravans coming back and forth that it was the fact of that, that positive action that they took against the bandits, that the roads were now safer. And they started to, realize that they were developing a reputation based on their actions, because, throughout the campaign, I've always had the idea that I want to really impart upon the players, some of whom have never played AD&D First Edition before, so they're just not, they might not have encountered true old school style of play, that I wanted them to start to understand Gary Gygax's vision of a heroic fantasy. And a heroic fantasy is in my view a it's when you're asking fairly ordinary individuals to do extraordinary things, or at least to attempt to do extraordinary things, and for the player party to be generally a force who is trying to do good, and even though they might not always succeed, but they're at least trying to do good, and to kind of build that mentality into them. So and they started developing that along the way, and certainly by this point, um, they started showing signs of self-sacrifice and of I mean, not unto death, but certainly putting themselves at risk for each other started to show itself. And they decided right after this session, when it came time for divvying up the loot that they got from killing the bandits, um, they included the fighter who wasn't even present for it, um, but he was present in game, but he wasn't present for the actual fight. And so they said, "Oh no, we're going to share, we're going to share this loot across the board." And so again, it was something that wasn't suggested or prompted by me. It was something that the players, they're starting to form that camaraderie, and they're starting to form that group identity. And this is still before the campaign even had its name yet. So they still weren't the keepers of Quasqueton just yet. Um, and then they continue moving forward through the process, and we go through sessions. Sessions 7 and 8. And 7 was completely in, or 7 and 8 were actually completely in town, and then 9, 10, and 11 they were back in Quasqueton, digging deeper into the stronghold. This time they're going in through the back entrance, which is which was the troglodyte lair that they had entered. And again, I'm not going to rehash everything because I have videos for every single session that we've had, but they start to develop the idea of the overall campaign, that there are some real dark forces at play in the in this campaign. And that's when I started getting some ideas created or generated by player action of different changes that I would make to some of my previous ideas of where I was looking to go for the campaign, and just integrating some of these new things. So to go back to that, the great debate in our hobby is, are you running adventures? Is the dungeon master running the game and kind of driving the story, or is there so much player agency that it's really a sandbox that you're running, and the DM is just responding to what the players are either asking for, or it seems like they're looking for, and so you start feeding them different directions, and really you're just kind of following their lead. And I think that the best solution in my DMing style is to do a combination of both. I like to have a general sense of where the players might go, depending on what scenes I'm going to feed to them during the course of the session. But I, as a DM, I have to be able to pivot, and that's a very, very important skill for a DM to have, is the ability to pivot on sometimes on a dime, to make sure that the consequences for the player's actions, whether positive or negative, are something that can occur in real time, can occur in a long term as well. So have an impact long term that will be noticeable, and still keep the flow of the action going as well. So you do have to be mentally quick in order to pivot quickly and make those adjustments. And that's not something that you might have right away, or maybe you do. You're just a natural at it, but it's certainly something that you will develop over time. Is just that ability to make changes up, and and move in a slightly different direction than you might be intending to. And although I've never had it happen, I hear many people talking about, oh, well, my adventure session, got completely derailed by the players. They decided to go in a completely different direction, and that should be rare if it does happen. And if it does happen, you'll be able to respond to it if you do have somewhat of an open plan as you're going on. So I don't fully buy into, oh, you can only, we run a sandbox and it's player agency and almost complete player agency, and the DM is just kind of a responding agent to what they're doing. And I certainly don't agree with a DM that is a completely dominating everything that's happening and has a set plan going straight across the board. And this is often called a railroad, and just railroading the players through it. The only time that could or should even happen is in a convention setting where you have a set amount of time and you're running a one shot. Then that's the DM show, and the DM is going to run everybody through this, and this is what we intend to do. And players coming into that kind of a situation should know that that's what they're coming into, and so they shouldn't really be expecting to have as much circumstance. But in this kind of a campaign, where it's a group of players that have now at this point been together for 10 weeks, that flexibility has to be something that the DM is prepared to respond to if necessary. So now we get to the point where the players have completed 13 sessions of actual adventuring, and or one session or two sessions in town, leveling up. And so now they come after session 13. They go into roughly a 2-week span of time that they are once again leveling up or recovering from injuries, serious injuries that they had. I of course gave them more information about the campaign, and they're starting to develop an idea of what their what their role in the world is going to be. At least initially, now they're starting to grasp the fact that they are on a long journey, and that this is going to be an epic campaign if they're able to survive it and follow through for the many months, if not years, of campaign that we have embarked upon together. I mean, the buy-in for this being a multi-year campaign has already been proven. All right, the players have responded. When I first did my calculation, I was like, wow, I could really see this lasting like over 2 years, and no one balked at it. All 9 players were like, hey, that'll be cool. And I think that is something that's very, very important for you as a DM to experience, as is that long campaign, and just letting it organically occur as much as possible, but still have that underlying theme that threads its way all through the many weeks and months and even years of the storyline. And the campaign can continue going forward, even if some players and even if some characters certainly die, and even if some players drop off. You just keep on refreshing it, keep the story still kind of going along It's only if you have a complete party wipe, would you consider, well, this campaign now is completely over unless um, the same players want to bring in new characters and kind of pick up where where it left off. I don't lean that way as a DM towards allowing for that kind of thing, or really wanting that kind of thing. Um, if we did suffer a total party wipe amongst 9 player characters, which I seriously doubt could actually happen, even in first edition AD&D, um, if we ever did have that happening, I would really spend like a week just chatting with them and seeing where they would like us to continue going as a gaming group, because now I consider us to be a gaming group after 13 weeks and 1 season. So so as a season wrap up, I mean, all of the player characters are third level now. Some of them are discovering the challenges of going up in levels in AD&D First Edition, and that is the gold cost of actually training. So they're going to have to start making decisions of, well, what am I doing during the downtime to make a little extra coin, so that maybe if I was close enough to actually pay for level 4, I'd actually have the money to do so. And so and that introduction of that element of the game, which is in the Dungeon Master's Guide and it's in other various supplements throughout AD&D First Edition, is that it gives the world like a sense of realness to it. Is the fact that, well, you're not adventuring 24/7. You have to take breaks, and you will have downtime in between. There isn't a poster board with 50 different adventure hooks for them to buy into, and then just to go out. There's adventures are major events, and so you just don't have that many major events taking place, and so there will be downtime. And what was remarkable, because I know there's another segment of the OSR which talks about running your campaigns to match along with real time, world time, real time, time frame. Um, when I looked at it, I compared it. I was like, wow, we've been playing now for like 7 weeks, and in real time, and the player characters had been adventuring for about 7 weeks. It was actually matching up to a certain extent. Now, that's certainly not necessary. It was just a curiosity that kind of got answered for me. And I was like, oh, I guess it is actually possible to do it, but I certainly wouldn't do that. I wouldn't say, oh, well, we have to spend, this amount of time in real time, and have it mirrored in the game world the same way. It's unnecessary. Number one, at least in my opinion, it's unnecessary, and two, I think that I think that you harm the campaign by doing that as well, because then you'll create a sense of urgency that might not necessarily be needed, or it might actually alter uh, a much better story that is being laid out before everybody, and contributed by everybody. So I also want to make that clear as well, as that the a story is being told, and it is a cooperative story. Um, and although excuse me, um, some of it is kind of pre-planned, but there's still flexibility in there as well for it to go into different directions. So that's pretty much the wrap up. I mean, everyone is third level. I will, with the next couple of sessions, I'll spend a little time in introducing you to each of the player characters. I will kind of shorten this video down a little bit, so that we're not going to go into detailing all 9 player characters, but I will do a spotlight of each one going forward, maybe one session each session, so the next 9 sessions going forward, and you will meet the player character from the group. Each of them in that alphabetical order is what I'm planning on doing. So once again, thanks for joining. I hope you liked this video. I hope you're enjoying the campaign. If you have any questions or comments about running an AD&D First Edition campaign, please feel free to leave those comments in there. I hope I answered the question that was on the previous video. Some of the things that I do as a DM. I know that I was going to mention just some of the organizational things. You really should have a binder. And actually, let me just spend 2 seconds on that, or maybe more. So here's my binder, right? So the Keepers of Quasqueton, and I have all the character sheets up front here. So I have all 9 of them. I have to print out the 3rd level ones as well now. And then the first section, I have the campaign overview, which is secret from them. They don't actually know everything. And as the campaign is developing, I'm adding to it and expanding upon it. Then I go to a section that is the current adventure that I'm running. So I'm going to end up pulling out In Search of the Unknown and putting in a very highly modified Keep on the Borderlands will also go in there. And then as we move forward through the binder, I have my world building section. So as the characters are expanding throughout, I have a section dedicated to just my notes and everything on the world as the world is developing as they explore it. And so you don't have to have all of these preset things ready to go. You can make them on the fly using a variety of different resources. I know I use the Rogues Gallery from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition. This was 1980, and this really helps you create on the fly NPCs if you need them very quickly, and it's a great resource to have there. Then I go into my session recaps, which I have a whole section. I have a little visual imagery of each of the party members, and then I type up a recap of each of them, and that's what I use to do the videos. Yes, there's a lot of planning to do. I produce the maps, and I do a little cutout and show what they've actually uncovered during that particular session. And then notable NPCs that they encounter, I will have a section for them and have them in its own section. And then finally, the dearly departed PCs. So I have the character sheets of the PCs that were in the group that then left. And many weeks or months down the road, we'll do kind of like a retrospective of where the campaign has gone through several seasons. That was the other thing I decided on a season. A season will be like a level band. So season 1 was levels 1 through 3. In some cases, the characters made it to 4. Season 2 will be 4 to 7. Season 5 will be season 3. I'm sorry. Season 3 will be levels, anywhere from 7 on through 9, or maybe 8 to 12, someplace in that range. And then season 4 will be 12 plus, and season 5, which I plan on being the final season, will probably be around levels 14 plus, maybe 15, 16 or so. And that's where I'm kind of planning on this campaign going. So yeah, you kind of need a binder to kind of keep track of all of these things and to keep it going. And one other tip I'll give you is that if you are going to use older official modules, you can just take them, like the bare bones of them, modify them so that they're not really recognizable to players that were familiar with them. You might just use the maps or just some of the ideas or whatever, and it still makes it a lot less time consuming than writing your own adventures. It's I found that it's easier to modify what's there, introduce your own themes and things like that. And so I mean, because I've done it both ways. I've done it where you're just running straight modules, which doesn't always work. It's not ideal. And I've also written nothing but original content, which is very, very time consuming. And, since I still work full time and I have a family and I have all these other things, it's difficult to find that kind of time to do that much writing and still run a long-term campaign as well, with all of the other modifications. I also only run one campaign at a time, and I'm severely limiting the amount of time that I actually play, because when you are a dungeon master, you know, as far as gaming is concerned, that becomes your priority, is to make sure that your campaign is engaging for your players coming to the table, and it's a good idea not to split up too much of your time in playing in multiple games plus running your own game and everything. The game you're running will suffer if you're doing too many other activities, at least again in my opinion. So let me switch back to views here. So again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Leave your questions or comments if you have any questions or comments. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Share the video if you know anybody else out there that might benefit from looking at recaps of AD&D First Edition, or just hearing some of the ideas that I have about gaming, and certainly about old school gaming. And as always, enjoy the rest of your weekend. I look forward to seeing you on a gaming screen sometime soon, and you all have a great and healthy rest of the weekend, and so on. So have a great time. Take care.